Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Properties are vanishing, and sadly, they represent some really good property types that are hardly being built anymore. American housing is changing for good. 2 entire U.S. counties now have median home values of $2 million or more. You'll learn where those are and learn about a specific real estate investing strategy where investors are getting especially high yield returns in today's low affordability market, all today on Get Rich Education.
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, heard in 188 nations worldwide. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and you're listening to Get Rich Education. Last week, I covered a lot of bad news here as you and I uncovered some real estate problems. Of course, overall, when you're invested in real estate and obtain productive working income for yourself through tenants and their employment, you can almost always play another side of the coin and be profitable because, well, it really comes right back to the fact that real estate pays 5 ways simultaneously. For example, souring housing affordability. Well, that's bad for homeowners. That's bad news for people that are primarily wannabe homeowners and not you. You're an investor. In fact, here's exactly what that means when you're the investor. The homeownership rate has fallen in the past year. It's gone from 66% down to 65.6% due to that low affordability, okay? Well, that's just a 0.4% drop in the homeownership rate, and it is poised to fall further. All right, well, what does that 0.4 really mean? Well, that's the proportion of Americans that don't own their homes, so then they have to rent, and this means that there are hundreds of thousands more American renters today than there were just a year ago, and that pushes up rental demand, rental occupancy, and the price of rent itself. And that's what you get to capture all from a low affordability problem, which outsiders only think of as bad real estate news because it is bad news through the lens of that wannabe first-time homebuyer. Now, I want to tell you about the property types that are disappearing, just vanishing today, and it's the degree to which it's happening that you probably aren't aware of. I'll also tell you why it's personally concerning to me, why this is all going on at all, and I don't even see any reason that it's going to turn around. It's probably going to get worse. What's going on is basically that too many builders have thrown their duplex, triplex, and fourplex development plans out the car window like it's an apple core on a summer road trip. They are vanishing. Yes, 2 to 4 unit properties vanishing. In fact, if you're a newsletter subscriber here, you got to see a jarring chart that shows this. And what you'll basically see is that in 2007, the number of 2 to 4 unit properties built just fell off a cliff. It flatlined, and it still hasn't gotten up. The amount constructed now is still just 1/2 to 1/3 of what it had been in pre-global financial crisis years. Really, they're only closer to 1/3, all right? So what we're talking about here is only about 1/3 as many duplex, triplex, and fourplex starts today as there were 20 years ago. And this is sourced by the National Association of Home Builders. And some call this entire phenomenon MMM, triple M, multifamilies missing middle. And whatever you call this disappearing act, before I get to the reasons for why this is happening, I've got to tell you that this disappearance, it hurts me a little. It's sort of heartfelt because, as you know, I began this way with a fourplex. That was my first ever property of any kind. You know the story, where I lived in one unit and rented out the other three. It was just an amazing way to start with a bang. Well, now, when we compare this paltry construction, this dearth of MMM construction today, when we compare that to both smaller property types and larger property types, that being single-family homes and 5+ unit apartment buildings, well, construction of all three of these types fell hard around 2008. But here's the thing. Single-family homes and 5+ apartment buildings, they got back up around 2010, and they started resuming more building. But duplexes and fourplexes, they never did. They never had that happen. The number coming out of the market, that just kept flatlining those new starts. All right, so why exactly is this going on with these vanishing 2, 3, and 4 unit property construction types? Why this trend? Well, first, it's NIMBYism, not in my backyardism, primarily of those single-family homeowners, because once people are comfy in owning their single-family home, well, then they don't want higher-density duplexes and fourplexes built in their area. They fear that it can lower their property values. It'll almost certainly increase the traffic around that area. And the second reason is that there's simply just been less building overall of most all housing types, and I have discussed this elsewhere, so I won't get into it again. Yes, it is that erstwhile housing supply crash. A third reason for these vanishing 2 to 4 unit properties is the need for zoning reform and the adoption of what's called light touch density. Light touch density, that means a zoning strategy for more dense housing. And what are we up to now? 4? The fourth reason is that builders, they find more scale efficiencies when they build larger apartments. Fifth is limits in international building codes and international residential codes. And the sixth reason is, though this trend began around 2008, these more recent work-from-home lifestyles starting in 2020, that means that residents can live in single-family homes, and they tend to be further from the urban core rather than 2 to 4 unit properties. And this lifestyle trend right here, that can mean that this disappearing trend for this property type continues. And there you go. They are the 6 reasons for why fewer 2 to 4 unit properties are being built today, drastically fewer. And I lament this fact because, see, duplex to fourplex neighborhoods, they can have good walkability where you don't always need a car to get everywhere, and yet at the same time, they still have ample green space. Now, conversely, some fourplex neighborhoods, they can get to looking really junky when they all have different owners, and then there are dumpsters all over the place, like my first fourplex was, and like my second fourplex was as well. I really hope that builders become more attracted to the 2 to 4 unit space. See, with giant, large apartment complexes, say 300 units, well, the builder has to wait until the construction of all of those 300 units are done until they can start filling it with rent-paying tenants. So therefore, builders have to wait longer to start getting that rent income. But instead, construction of this missing middle housing, that can be broken into phases, and that way units can be open when they're completed, and that provides early rent revenue to the builder. And 2 to 4 unit properties, they really are an investor sweet spot, but due to builder and lifestyle trends like I'm describing, fewer are being built new. But please remember, there were many missing middle properties built decades ago, and they can still make good investment properties into the future. In fact, the first 2 fourplexes that I bought were both built in the mid-'80s. So there's still plenty that are already out there. The takeaway here for you is that you're going to be seeing fewer new ones, and that means that duplexes to fourplexes now take up a smaller proportion of America's housing stock, and that portion is positioned to become smaller and smaller going forward. So it's not the death of these properties, We even have home builders at GRE Marketplace right now with new build 2 to 4plexes. So it isn't their death, but they are dying, waning in number. Now, GRE recently got a hold of some jaw-dropping info here. Oh, my gosh. Now, remember a few years ago, maybe even 10 or more years ago, when you probably heard something like certain small towns in California, Silicon Valley, they now had median-priced homes that hit the $1 million mark. And when you first heard that, you might have thought, oh, wow, it's not just neighborhoods, but entire towns in aggregate have hit the $1 million mark in some high-priced American places. Well, then get ready for this. As housing affordability makes headlines in California and its wealthiest cities continue to fight building more housing, we have 2 Bay Area counties, not towns, but entire counties that have hit a milestone. The median price for sold homes there has climbed to $2 million or more. We're not just talking $1 million anymore, and we're not just talking about one upper crust town, but 2 entire California counties now have median home prices of $2 million or more. And notice, these are not asking prices. No speculation here. These are the values, the amounts that they have actually sold for. And this is according to a recent California Association of Realtors report. Median homes are now $2 million plus in which 2 Bay Area counties, you might wonder? Well, first, Santa Clara County, which includes San Jose, they notched an even $2 million back in April. And yes, this is more than San Francisco County's $1.8 million. And the second county, it spirals even higher than that. The second California county with median home prices of $2 million plus is San Mateo County. It's basically a county that lies between San Francisco and San Jose. And that's where the median home price sold for, in San Mateo County, California, $2.17 million. Not just one upper crust town, but an entire county. Not just $1 million, not even $2 million anymore, but $2.17 million. And this is not for a fancy, lavish home. This is just the median priced home in the middle. And San Mateo County, that is home to the nation's most expensive zip code, by the way, Atherton, California, where the median home price tops the charts nationally at $7.1 million. That stat is according to Compass Real Estate. And if that's not enough, homes are still flying off the shelves there. Their days on market is now at the lowest since 2022. And though all this sounds pretty astonishing right now, you know what? If you are listening to this episode 10 years from now, well into the 2030s, you might think these were the good old days here. How quaint, because over the next 10 years, we all expect more inflation, and we've still got more housing shortage years between now and, say, 10 years into the future. And of course, here at GRE, we don't tend to focus on the high-priced markets, which tend to be on the coasts. Things like this, really, it's just a harbinger of what's to come to more parts of the nation later on. What we do here is we help you win in real estate without being a landlord and without being a flipper. As a savvy investor that tends to buy either new or fixed-up properties and might have a manager manage them for you, hands-off is the place to be. Hands-off is being an investor, and you get the best tax advantages this way, too, when you're hands-off. And you know something? Some people that get into real estate investing, they think that they have to be a flipper or that they have to be a landlord in order to make it profitable. Now, there's nothing wrong with those two disciplines so much, flipping or landlording. I was a landlord for a little while on my own properties. Most of my investment career, I used a property manager, and I never flipped. It's just that these things, flipping and landlording, they're not any sort of prerequisite to you being a successful investor. You can shortcut all of that with turnkey real estate investing, or like with a different strategy that we're going to talk about later today, what most people really want is the financial freedom that real estate investing brings. But in order to get there, it's often not the route that you think it is. It's typically not flipping or landlording. And really, it's this way with a lot of things. For example, say that you want to own an ice cream business. Well, most people think that they have to start their own ice cream business from scratch. And you need to find a space and you need to buy all the equipment and develop systems and go through the excruciating process of hiring all of your staff. No, a lot of times you can shortcut all of that by not starting your own ice cream business, but instead studying, vetting, and buying an existing ice cream business without having to start your own from scratch. Be strategic, study a little, shortcut the process, and get in where it's profitable. You want the benefit of owning real estate without having to use a nail gun yourself or being a manager where your 25 tenants can text you. What kind of life are you building for yourself then? You want the benefit of owning an ice cream business. The way to get to the end goal, the path there, is often different than you think. And here's another example that I can relate to, but I think that you will too. Do you have a favorite real estate influencer out there and they think about starting a podcast? Well, I personally know 3 real estate podcasters out there that have all quit. They produced some episodes and all 3 quit doing their podcast. And these are just among people I know and just real estate thought leaders, just that space, and all recent. Hosting your own podcast platform is a ton of work, from you need to have a huge bank of your own original content to having the ability to book big name guests and then making sure they're prepared, to making sure you have the right marketing team so that a podcast actually reaches the right people. It is work, work, work. And seemingly no one in this world knows that better than me, with 500 plus episodes reliably released every single week since 2014. And we don't replay old shows either. There is nothing passive about this. There are so many shows today that if your favorite real estate influencer starts one, they're going to be competing with a lot that are already out there. I mean, anymore, even celebrities that start podcasts, they usually don't get any substantial reach or traction. All these people that start and quit their podcast, they were too slow to realize that actually they didn't want to host a podcast. What they really wanted is for their voice to be heard. Well, the way to shortcut that, like with turnkey real estate investing or with buying an existing ice cream business, is that influencer should have developed a strategy for being a guest on other shows that are already popular and established, probably by hiring an experienced and connected booking agent. That way you've outsourced all of that marketing and reach activity to another show that already did that for you. So the point is, be clear on getting what you want. What is the goal that you want first? It's probably a large real estate portfolio built for leveraging income, and then work your way back to try to find the most efficient route to get there. And there are often shorter paths to get there than what you first thought. Now, when we talk about where are the best real estate deals today, you have to look harder than you did, say, 8 to 10 years ago. Coming up shortly, you'll have the pleasure of hearing an in-house chat with I and one of GRE's own investment coaches. We're going to talk about a strategy that's specific and proven, but underutilized in order to recapture those higher cash-on-cash returns like you could have gotten back in, say, 2015 and 2016. And for a time, I had been talking about how new build properties and their builder interest rate buydowns, that they're really the place to be. And that's still true, but not to the extent that it was just a year ago. Because today, some builders, they're not paying down your interest rate for you as much as they did last year. They're asking you to pay more toward it. Now, a few minutes ago, I told you about America's vanishing duplexes to fourplexes. And if you're one of our newsletter readers, you got to see a jarring chart or two that demonstrates exactly what I was talking about there. And also in our newsletter, I show you great maps, real estate maps, that beautifully demonstrate housing market trends and where the opportunities are for you. Also, in a recent letter, I showed you exactly where I'm getting 8% interest paid to me in what's basically a savings account. If you don't already subscribe, it is free. Our email letter is called the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. It's concise, valuable info that's just good, clean content that I put directly into your hands. It is easier to use than a website. Today's websites have paywalls and cookies disclaimers or pop-up ads. This is just the good stuff directly from me, straight to you. And you can get the letter now at getricheducation.com/letter. That's getricheducation.com/letter. In a world of AI and bots, I actually write every word of the Don't Quit Your Daydream letter myself, just like I have from day one. And another easy way to start the free letter is text GRE to 66866. Just do it right now while it's on your mind. Text GRE to 66866. More next. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Your bank is getting rich off of you. The national average bank account pays less than 1% on your savings. If your money isn't making 4%, you're losing your hard-earned cash to inflation. Let the liquidity fund help you put your money to work with minimum risk. Your cash generates up to an 8% return with compound interest year in and year out instead of earning less than 1% sitting in your bank account. The minimum investment is just $25K. You keep getting paid until you decide you want your money back. Their decade-plus track record proves they've always paid their investors 100% in full and on time. And I would know because I'm an investor too. Earn 8%, hundreds of others are. Text FAMILY to 66866. Learn more about Freedom Family Investments Liquidity Fund on your journey to financial freedom through passive income. Text FAMILY to 66866. For a lender that's a specific expert with income property, you need Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. In GRE history, from beginners to veterans, they provided our listeners with more mortgages than anyone. It's where I get my own loans for single-family rentals up to fourplexes. Start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even customize a plan tailored to you for growing your portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Peak Prosperity's Chris Martinson. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and Don't Quit Your Daydream.
Hey, well, I'd like to welcome in GRE's extraordinary investment coach. He's book smart because he's got his MBA. He's street smart because he's an active, direct real estate investor, just like I am. Before joining GRE back in 2021, he worked for financial publishing companies and in the banking sector too and elsewhere. And today, as an investment coach here, he helps beginning real estate investors understand the process of acquiring rental property, and he helps veteran investors optimize their strategies to save on taxes and more. Hey, it's terrific to welcome back Naresh Vissa.
Thanks a lot, Keith. It's been a while, but looking forward to talking real estate.
Before we're done today, we're going to tell you about an upcoming live GRE virtual event where you learn how to get 20 to 25% of immediate built-in equity through real estate. And before we do, Naresh, let's talk about what's really going on. Besides giving GRE devotees free education and guidance like you do, you also help them find the best deals on income properties nationwide. And for a time, brand new built-to-rent properties, they looked good, and many still do, with a lot of rate buy-downs into the 5s and even the 4s on those new build properties. But this year, I learned that builders aren't contributing to buying down the rates for the investor like they had last year, and that the onus seems to be more on the investor to buy the rate down with some of these builders. So tell us more about what's happening in America's build-to-rent sector.
Well, Keith, build to rent, for those who don't know, it's been around here at GRE, build to rent asset classes, build to rent real estate. It's the concept of builders building real estate properties with the intention of selling them to investors so they can rent it out. So right now, I live in a house. It was built and I bought it because the builder intended for somebody to buy it and live in it. That's not build to rent. Build to rent is the idea of specifically selling it to investors like our listeners, like our loyal followers who live out of state and who want to rent the properties out to tenants. Now, build to rent was very hot and it's still popular. I don't want to call it hot, but it's still popular for those who want new construction properties. However, the rehabs are making a furious comeback because there was about a 4-year period from 2019 to 23 or so where you just couldn't find good cash flowing rehabs.
Right.
And when I say rehabs, I mean these older properties that were built 50 years ago, maybe as long as 120 years ago. We have some properties in our inventory that were built in the late 1800s and they've just kept being rehabbed and renovated. Properties are making a furious comeback because they're cash flowing better. Previously, they were just cash flowing marginally better than new construction built to rent properties. Now, especially with a strategy called BRRRR, which we'll talk about some more, you can have the opportunity to get cash on cash returns back to what you remember in 2016, 2015, where we're talking 15, 16% cash on cash returns. I mean, some of our BRRRR clients or listeners who ended up buying BRRRRs, they're doing 20, 21, all the way up to 30% cash on cash returns. So BRRRR simply means buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat the cycle. So that's B followed by 4 R's, BRRRR. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat the process again. And it's during that refinance where investors are getting a good chunk of their down payment back. Because what happens in that refinance is after you rehab it and you rent it out at the target rent, which almost all of these are renting out at very aggressive high target rents. When you refinance it, the property appraises at a value that's much, much greater post-rehab than when you initially bought it. And that's where you get essentially your money back. You can choose to keep it in with the mortgage company so you have more equity in the property, or you can take the cash back and use it to buy more BRRRR properties. It's become a very popular form of real estate investing. People think when they hear this, oh, this sounds like flipping.
Right.
This is not flipping. Flipping is kind of like day trading. You're looking to make a quick buck. Whereas in this case, you're not selling the property. You're keeping the property with the intention of renting it out and collecting the cash flow from your tenant. So that's in a nutshell what BRRRR is. And we are having a live event on Tuesday, June 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's Tuesday, June 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time to talk about and go over this BRRRR process, the BRRRR key process. Our listeners are familiar with turnkey. Well, we have BRRRR key, which is similar, except it's using the BRRRR method. And Keith, you probably know this, and you've talked about it a little bit on your podcast. BRRRR has become the most popular strategy that our investors are utilizing this year, 2024.
Yeah, now back to the build to rent. They're the new build properties, as attractive as they can be because they attract a certain quality of tenant and they're not going to have any maintenance or repair issues most likely for quite a while. The thing with those is, you might pay $300K or more for a new build single family home in the build to rent style with 20% down payment, 5% for closing costs, you're out of pocket $75K. One reason that this has become the most popular strategy for GRE followers we're talking about here, the BRRRR strategy, is that you could come out of pocket with a lot less to begin with.
That's number one. Number one is we have some GRE followers who went into this BRRRR key and they put no money down. They got lucky. they initially bought the property and the property appraised so much that they got their money back and their down payment was actually zero. They didn't make money on it, but what they allocated, what they thought that they would allocate, 25% down, they ended up using that money since they got it back to buy a second property and then a third property and then a fourth property. We have one guy who bought 6 properties, all BRRRRs, because he didn't get, I don't want to say, look, we're not making promises that you're going to put 0% down. That's not the promises that we're making. The worst case scenario is that you put 25% down, and that's your standard real estate investment. But there is a chance that you could put 15% down or 10% down if the rehab turns out really well. And if you get a good appraiser, there's a chance it can happen. But the goal here, again, is not to make a quick buck or to house hack. We're not taking shortcuts here. The goal here is simply to buy a property, renovate it or rehab it, and drive up the rent price, drive up the value of the property, put a good tenant in there, and call it a day, collect those cash flows. Now, I do want to say a few things about that process. So, like I said, the first thing that you do is you buy. So first you buy, then you rehab. You do not have to do, we call it BRRRR, because everything is done for you. So when people hear this, they're like, oh, this sounds like I live in Florida. I don't want to go to Memphis. And by the way, this specific market is in Memphis, Tennessee, that we're focusing on. We have BRRRRs in Baltimore, Maryland, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But we've identified Memphis as not just the hottest, but it just makes the most sense numbers wise. And so I want to go back to the point of, hey, you don't have to physically go or even go on Google and find handymen or rehabbers to do this for you. Our BRRRR provider, the best part is they do it all for you. It's completely taken care of. You literally just sign some papers once you decide that you like a property and the specs of the property. You sign some papers, they take care of it. The rehab takes about 90 days. Then from rehab to closing, it takes another 40 days or so. And then from closing to someone signing a lease, that takes another 30 days to find somebody, stick them in there. And it takes another 30 days after that for the tenant to move in. So overall, this process can actually take, just for one property, it can take 6 months.
Now, Naresh has touched on it somewhat. One conventional problem with the BRRRR strategy, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, is that first R, the rehab, because it involves vetting and managing contractors, which is a real nightmare for many. So instead, we're talking about tapping into a system with a proven team of contractors and lenders and project managers to make it easy. It's known as BRRRR, and it's in profitable Memphis.
Profitable Memphis, and I'll say this about Memphis. We're going to talk way more about this on the webinar. Highly recommend people go to GREWebinars.com, GREWebinars.com. You can sign up for the webinar there. It's actually live. So this is not like something that you just can show up to whenever you want. It's a live event on Tuesday, June 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Tuesday, June 25th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. GREWebinars.com is how you can register. And like you said, we could have focused on Baltimore, Maryland, or Pittsburgh. Memphis has really, and I myself, by the way, own 5 properties, and 4 in Memphis proper, and 1 is in the Memphis area. It's in Mississippi, a suburb of Memphis. And this, I don't want to call it a town because Memphis used to be one of the most popular towns in the South back in the day. But this city has really come up as a result of pandemic, of population growth, of even inflation. We've seen rents go up. We've seen the population go up. Memphis is not what you think of from 8 years ago, 7 years ago when I first bought my properties. I'll admit, when I bought my first property 7 years ago in Memphis, I had a lot of problems with tenants. I had a lot of problems with the city. I didn't like what I was reading about the police department, just all sorts of things. Not the police department, just crime in general. And Memphis has really turned itself around, not completely turned itself around, but it's gotten better. And we're seeing it just on the investment side because that's where we're seeing appreciation growth. My personal properties, they're up since 2020. Since January 2020, that's when I closed on my last Memphis property. They're all up at least 50% in value. So it's a market that's still appreciating. But the most important thing, because we are cash flow investors, not necessarily appreciation investors, it's great to get the appreciation, but the rents keep going up. And I actually, today, Keith, talked to a BRRRR client, loyal GRE listener and follower, who ended up buying 3 properties, and she's on her 4th one, or about to do a 4th one with this Memphis BRRRR provider. And when she told me her rents, I was blown away at how much these properties were renting for before the rehab. So it's not just the appreciation again that goes up after the rehab, how much they were renting for before the rehab. We're talking less than $800 a month. And post-rehab, her rents went up by nearly 50%, about 45% on average post-rehab. These like 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom homes. Initially, she bought them, and this is how a lot of the properties are. They only had 2 bedrooms, and they converted one of the spaces, the rehabber, converted at no extra, it's all inclusive of the rehab charges. They were able to find space in a lot of these properties that were 2 bedrooms to create a 3rd bedroom and turn them into 3-bedroom properties instead of 2-bedroom properties, which also improves the value of the home, and you can get another body in there and increase the rent. So GRE listeners have been really, really happy with this BRRRR process, because at the end of the day, you really do get more bang for your buck. Yes, new construction overall is just safer. We have tons of great new construction providers, especially in Florida, whom we recommend. But this is an alternative for those people who don't have $100,000 sitting in the bank ready to invest in a new construction single family or a new construction duplex. The BRRRR, really all you need is about $20,000-$25,000 to do it. And like I said, if you get lucky, you could get a decent portion of that back after the rehab.
Well, you bring up so many good points there, Naresh. For one thing, with real estate, you can intentionally improve the value. That's something that you cannot do if you own a stock, or if you own cryptocurrency, or if you own gold. You can help control what your investment is worth, and a lot of that happens here in the rehab process. Well, Naresh would love to tell you more, including walking you through an example with numbers, but that's the best place for him to do it. That is on the live event next week, because it is co-hosted by Naresh. You can join the live virtual event from the comfort of your own home. You can ask questions and have them answered in real time. It is all free. And we'll also be sharing special off-market BRRRR inventory in Memphis for 2, 3, and 4-bedroom properties. So go ahead and attend on June 25th, which again is next Tuesday. Be sure to register now at GREwebinars.com. Naresh, it's been great to walk through the BRRRR. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, good info from GRE Investment Coach Naresh. As always, next week's live event, that could be a bigger deal than the Paris Olympics this summer and this year's presidential election combined. Oh, yes. Well, at least it expects to be more profitable for you than those other events. It'll also be more entertaining when you join as an attendee live next week. Certainly more entertaining and informative than Olympic handball and Olympic race walking. No doubt about that. I don't think I've offended any race walking fans, because there are only perhaps 5 in the world. In any case, BRRRR is a process by which, after you buy, months later, you can expect to refinance at a higher valuation since the property has been rehabbed from your initial purchase, and then you get a big chunk of your own down payment back, meaning that you have less invested in the deal. And that's why you get a higher cash-on-cash return, because cash-on-cash return, all that is your annual cash flow divided by your initial investment or your starting equity position. The last R in BRRRR is repeat. You can repeat sooner because you did get some of your invested cash back, and that's part of what makes the strategy so effective. Now, as part of your refi, you might get a post-appraisal rehab that's so high, you essentially get all of your down payment money returned to you, at which point it would be an infinite return because you don't have anything invested in the deal, but you should not count on having all of it returned, just a lot of it or most of it. Next week's live event is where the BRRRR Real Estate Investing Strategy gets introduced to a wider swath of America. One last time, attend live next Tuesday, the 25th. I really encourage you to check it out. Be sure to sign up for the virtual GRE live event now. It's pretty quick and easy to do at GREwebinars.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.